The Digital Production Buzz is brought to you by Keyflow Pro, media asset management software designed to meet the needs of workgroups at an affordable price.
Tonight on The Buzz, we are talking about object storage. We've been using it for years, but now it's migrating to the desktop. Tonight, we'll learn what it is, how it works, and why media creators and distributors need to pay attention to it. We start with Tom Coughlin, the president of Tom Coughlin Associates. He presents a background on what object storage is, why it was designed, and who it's for. Next, Alex Grossman, the president of Symply Inc., explains how object storage can enable media creators to do more with their storage and how object storage can be used on the desktop. Next, Caringo was one of the first companies creating object storage software. Tonight, Adrian Herrera, VP of Marketing for Caringo, tells us about their company, their products, and how they are used in media distribution. Next, Erik Weaver is a luminary of the future of media and entertainment for HGST, who talks with us about why we need to start to change our storage solutions. All this, plus James DeRuvo with our weekly doddleNEWS update. The Buzz starts now.
Since the dawn of digital filmmaking,
Authoritative.
one show serves a worldwide network of media professionals,
Current.
uniting industry experts,
Production.
filmmakers,
Post-production.
and content creators around the planet.
Distribution.
From the media capital of the world in Los Angeles, California, the Digital Production Buzz goes live now.
Welcome to the Digital Production Buzz, the world's longest-running podcast for the creative content industry, covering media production, post-production, and marketing around the world. Hi, my name is Larry Jordan. Tonight, we're talking about object storage. Let me start by saying that some of these discussions are highly technical and not always easy to understand. Object storage is a new way of storing, tracking, accessing, and sharing files that forms the foundation of all cloud computing. And now it's migrating to the desktop. Object storage is a computer data storage architecture that manages data as objects, as opposed to other storage architectures like file systems, which manage data as a file hierarchy, folder and file, or block storage, which manages data as blocks within sectors and tracks on a hard disk. The reason we want to cover this subject this week is that object storage is moving from the massive servers in the cloud to private clouds used by the enterprise, and now appearing in the smaller workgroups of media production and distribution. Because media creates files that are both massive and numerous, it's time for all of us to better understand this technology. Even if you only have 50 to 100 terabytes of media in your storage pool, object storage may be worth considering. And helping you better understand what's going on is what tonight's show is all about. Before we start, however, I want to invite you to subscribe to our free weekly show newsletter at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Every issue, every week, provides quick links to the different segments on the show, plus articles of interest to filmmakers. And best of all, it's free and comes out every Saturday. And now it's time for our weekly doddleNEWS update with James DeRuvo. Hello, James.
Hello, Larry.
So what's in the news this week?
Well, this week, Red is returning to the final frontier with a new low-light sensor. These guys just can't help but build stuff. It's a new low-light Super 35 millimeter sensor that fits somewhere in between the helium Super 35 sensor that they have and that full-frame VistaVision Monstro sensor. And it has an additional 2 stops of dynamic range over the helium. And it was designed to practically image in complete darkness. It was made for a very, quote-unquote, special customer for work in deep space.
Well, who do you think that is?
It could be NASA, but I think the conventional wisdom is that Red has built this new sensor for Elon Musk's SpaceX Corporation and their upcoming launch of their new Falcon Heavy Mars rocket. This is a great story. They're going to launch it in a couple of days, and they need some ballast to get the payload right. And so Elon Musk is putting his Tesla convertible built into the rocket, and it's going to shoot it up into outer space. And I think he wants to be able to capture it on camera. And so they made this special low light sensor for work in outer space. And the downside is they only were allowed to make 5 additional sensors that they can sell. So anyone that does any extreme low light video can get one of these, but it's not going to be cheap.
Red is pushing the final frontier. What else is happening this week?
Blackmagic today, just today, updated their Ursa Mini and is turning it into a broadcast beast. They want to make an affordable 4K, ultra high definition, broadcast quality camera that has 12 stops of dynamic range, supports both analog and newer digital B4 lenses, plus the option of adding the EF mount or the PL mount. They've also announced a new 4K broadcast switcher, an updated ATEM 4ME switcher, and you can turn your old 2ME switcher into a 4ME switcher with a free software update.
So what's your take on the announcement?
The updated Ursa Mini can now be used as a broadcast camera, capturing in 4K and full HD, but it can also work as a field camera supporting B4, as well as cinematic lenses in EF and PL mounts. So it's really 2 cameras in one, and that'll give a shooter an additional revenue stream. And it's under $4,000. It's a bargain for stringers looking to boost their income.
Okay, that's Blackmagic. What's our third story this week?
Facebook continues to go to the dark side. They're experimenting with vertical video. The social giant has discovered that more users are watching video on their mobile devices. Something like 97% of Facebook users will watch video on Facebook using a smartphone. And they're more likely to watch a vertical video because it's just easier to hold the phone that way. They've commissioned 15 content creators from around the world to make vertical videos in order to start pushing this new kind of genre and format.
I love your image of Facebook going to the dark side. So what's your real opinion of this format?
I understand the allure of vertical video. It's, because more and more people are ingesting their content with a mobile device. But in my opinion, that tall and skinny aspect ratio completely ruins a video presentation by making it with these thick black bars on either side. I'm just not a fan of it. And I don't think that it's going to have a future beyond mobile. But if you want to get a kick, go to YouTube and do a search for vertical video syndrome. It's an hysterical video that kind of points fun at the whole craze.
And James, what are the stories you following this week?
Other stories we're following this week include Canon could lock down future cameras and lenses with a fingerprint ID system. Zoom has a great new mini field recorder, and there's a ton of new firmware updates.
And where can we find all these stories?
All these stories and more can be found at doddleNEWS.com.
And James DeRuvo is the editor-in-chief of Doddle News and joins us every week. James, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next Thursday.
All right, see you then.
When you can't find your media, you need a media asset management solution. KeyFlow Pro. This simple but powerful software is designed specifically to help you organize, track, and find your media. Whether you work alone or part of a group, its intuitive user interface helps you easily store, sort, search, play, annotate, and share your media using team-based shared libraries over a network. Its wide range of features are all at a very affordable price. And with the new 1.8.3 update, rescanning is up to 10 times faster. Plus, KeyFlow Pro is integrated with macOS notifications, enabling you to collaborate faster and smarter, all in real time. KeyFlow Pro is available in the Mac App Store, or get a 30-day free trial at keyflowpro.com. KeyFlow Pro. Simple, elegant, and surprisingly affordable. Tom Coughlin is a Silicon Valley consultant, a storage analyst, a senior member of the IEEE, and the organizer of the annual Storage Visions and Creative Storage conferences. Hello, Tom. Welcome back.
Hi there. It's good to be back.
Tonight, we're taking a closer look at object storage. How would you define what this is?
I think in order to understand object storage, you need to have a little bit of background on some of the other more common storage architectures. We'll start with what's called block storage. And the data that's actually stored on a storage device like a hard disk drive or a solid state drive, for example, is stored in blocks. And blocks are a certain range of data. It's in one physical location on the storage device. Block storage is what most storage devices are basically built around, is storage in blocks. A bunch of blocks can be put together to create a file. Now, a file could be a video, it could be some audio, it could be stuff like that. What you do is you break up the data that goes into a file into little pieces called blocks, and those are individually stored on the storage device.
So the way that most hard disks work is they divide the storage space on the hard disk into little blocks, little cubby holes.
Yes.
And they drop pieces of the file in those blocks.
That's correct.
So then within these blocks, the files are stored in blocks, and then they're organized by the file system. Now tell me what a hierarchical file system is.
A hierarchical file system is basically a structure of different folders that contain files. Those folders may be within folders. That having something within something else is what they mean by hierarchy.
So the benefit to a hierarchical file system is it enables us to find the stuff that we stored on the hard disk.
It's one way of finding things that we store on the hard disk, that we store in a storage system in this case, if we're talking about a network-attached storage device.
Okay. So I've got that. That's what we're using now with our RAIDs and our hard disks.
Most of them. There also are systems that are built around organizing things at the block level, and those are called storage area networks. So there's file-based storage, there's block-based storage. And if done properly, the block-based storage can actually be faster because if it has enough control of where things are stored on the individual storage devices, if the system does, then it can organize them in ways that allows you, in the right circumstances, to get very fast performance. So some of the highest performance storage may actually be in a storage area network, which is block-based, but that has limited metadata, and all of the information basically on putting the files together is in the application.
Okay, so then that's block storage and file storage. So where does object storage fit in?
What object storage is, instead of having this hierarchical structure of folders within folders, files and folders within folders, it increases and changes the kind of metadata that we use to find the content itself, to find the individual files. And the way it does that is it does not have a hierarchical structure. A basic object storage system has a very flat structure. There's no folders within folders. As a consequence, it is capable of scaling to much larger number of things that are accessible within the same storage architecture, which can span geographic areas and go across multiple storage units in multiple places. So the big advantage of the object storage is it allows you to be able to store a lot more things. It does that by having an object. Now, an object contains the data, and it also contains advanced metadata concepts, which can be much richer than is allowed by, say, network-attached storage devices with their hierarchical structure. Part of what gives object storage its value is the things you can do with that metadata, which can even include special purpose metadata, which a designer can put into that content. It can assist in its use and finding it and using that content. Object storage was really taken and embraced by the hyperscale folks that build all the cloud infrastructure, all the cloud storage systems, big data centers. The biggest application they had for the object storage was they had huge amounts of content, say Facebook with all of their photographs, and they needed to store this cost effectively. So what they did is they created a object storage system with software, so it's a software-defined storage, on top of commodity hardware, i.e. the cheapest storage hardware that they could buy that would still serve the purpose they had. A lot of the cloud basically is object storage. The big amounts of content that are stored in the cloud are stored as objects in object storage systems because it's the way they do it is cost effective. Object storage then has been good for archival applications or where you want to keep a lot of content. It has a history of not having as high as performance as, for instance, a network attached storage system, which is file-based, or a storage area network, which is block-based. Those can have higher performance than the object storage. But part of that is because of that focus on as low a cost of storage as you can. Object storage allows you to then scale to much larger amounts of things that can access within a given storage namespace. No matter where it's stored at, it can be stored in a geographically different area, and it can still be part of this object storage system. So it can scale to billions of items. And it has this specialized metadata, which also can be tied into applications. So there's things that can be done within storage system because of the specialized metadata capabilities. Now, if you start building object storage with equipment that is specialized on the use of object storage that is focused on higher performance, it's possible that object storage can also make inroads into some of these higher performance applications.
That is a hard subject to figure out, the object storage. I didn't realize it was as technically complex as it is.
Yeah, it involves, the basic architecture of how you're storing information. And what it is, it's creating this really flat architecture because the hierarchy can get in your way. It can slow you down and makes it hard to store a lot of individual things, because it gets so complicated. But this flat architecture allows you to sort of directly access individual pieces without going through a hierarchy. So it scales more.
Can we be object storage without being cloud-based at all?
You can be object storage without having any connection to the internet. It can just be local storage.
Within media and entertainment, who should pay attention to object storage? Only people that are storing stuff to the cloud, or does it have broader implications?
I think it has broader implications. First of all, there is all the public cloud infrastructure, which is being widely used for instance, content delivery. Content libraries are often basically a cloud storage system, CDNs, that sort of thing. Also for archiving. But especially in the media and entertainment industry, there are folks that are not so comfortable with putting their valuable content into a public cloud. So private cloud sort of infrastructure is another place where this is going to occur, or even what's called a hybrid cloud, which contains maybe some things in a public cloud, some things in a private cloud, could as well benefit from these object storage type systems.
Can object storage coexist with our existing storage, or do we have to do all one or all the other?
It can coexist, and in fact, an object storage system can even support a file-based access. Oftentimes, it's a software-defined storage architecture. It can be implemented on top of existing hardware.
Again, within media and entertainment, who should pay attention to object storage the most? In other words, who's it's really targeted for?
Well, object storage was developed and is most of the storage that's in the cloud. I mean, there's a growing amount of people using public cloud services and also people implementing their own private cloud or some type of hybrid cloud, which can either be their private and a public cloud or a private and multiple public clouds. It's basically becoming, I think, a universally available tool. In fact, as a consumer, you're using the cloud all the time because that's where the applications that you run, for instance, on your mobile phone are located. So it's kind of become something that it touches all of us in some way, and will do so increasingly in the future, especially as people become more comfortable and as it's clear that there is security and encryption and protection of privacy, leakage, and that sort of thing, which is especially important for those valuable media assets in our industry.
One of the things I've learned, Tom, is that storage changes constantly, and it is not necessarily easy to understand. Tell me about your conferences, because those could be really helpful to folks.
I think they really could be. So we do the Creative Storage Conference, which is going to be June 7th in Culver City, California, which focuses on applications and architectures of digital storage in media and entertainment. And we're looking especially to recruit speakers who are media and entertainment professionals who have some experience with digital storage, would like to talk about that, things they like, things they've tried, problems they've had. The website for that, get more information on that or to participate is creativestorage.org.
Tom, for people who want to keep track of what you and your company are doing, where can they go on the web?
You can go to tomcoughlin.com.
That's all one word, TOMCOUGHLIN, tomcoughlin.com. And the upcoming June conference is Creative Storage at creativestorage.org. And the fall conference is Storage Visions, and that's at storagevisions.com. And Tom, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Larry.
Alex Grossman is the CEO of Symply. He's a 25-year veteran of the storage industry and a former senior director at Apple, where he was responsible for driving the development of Apple's server and storage products. Hello, Alex. Welcome.
Hi, Larry. How are you today?
I am really looking forward to our conversation because if anybody can really explain what object storage is, it's you. But before we do, give me a quick description of what Symply is.
Oh, yeah. Symply is, we're a storage vendor. That's kind of crazy, huh, Larry? We actually do media entertainment storage, but we do it in a slightly different way. We actually build smaller workgroup storage based on common platforms, virtualized technology, storage defined, and we use a backbone of StorNext, which is the quantum product, probably the largest file system out there today in media entertainment, and it's 100% compatible with Xsan. So we do scale-out workgroup clustered storage. Very simple stuff.
You've been involved with object storage for a long time, and what we've learned from Tom is that it's principally used today for cloud services such as Amazon or Dropbox. Why should we consider moving to object storage for the desktop or media production environments?
Well, that's a great question. And yes, I've had a lot of experience with it, and it's changed over the years. And really, what Tom probably talked about was how object storage is ideal for larger long-term storage because, the cloud vendors will handle trillions. In fact, I think Azure recently said they had over 100 trillion objects out there. So when you're talking about large scale, there's definitely a lower cost for doing object storage. And it's also very highly protected. It's kind of self-protecting and it's very safe. And it's also, from the cloud perspective, it's really easy to get to. So one of the challenges, and part of the reason we should consider the desktop is, one of the challenges we have as content creators is that we have content management challenges. We all need to protect the content we have and protect it well because our hope is that it's going to be worth something over time. If we have the next Star Wars or the next Gone with the Wind, think about that. How long we'll have that content and how much it's going to be worth. The idea of taking large content and putting it up to the cloud and only putting it up to the cloud, it's a great idea, but it can be cost prohibitive if we ever need to bring it back. And it can also take a long time to get it there. There's technologies like Snowball from Amazon that allow us to actually take a RAID array and connect it to our SAN or our NAS infrastructure within our facility, and then copy it to that RAID array, put it on the FedEx truck, the fastest sneaker in the world, and move it up to the cloud. Then Amazon will load it up, it'll go into Glacier, and it'll be there for a long time, which is a great thing. The problem is you're doing that frequently, and you're having it still in one spot controlled by someone else. So the question really is, what do you do if you want to have long-term retention of content? And in fact, before I even go there, one of the things that we see quite often is it's really not even about long-term retention. It's about the ultimate goal of having a workflow where it's seamless all the way from ingest to archive, and then also it's round-tripping so you can come back into your work and process. And so that means you really need it nearline, you need to access it quickly, and you need it in your facility. And if that's the case, what technologies do you use to be able to do that? What's the ultimate goal? Well, for the longest time, if we wanted to talk about long-term retention or even nearline retention, we use tape. I mean, as much as, I might have been quoted in 1998 saying tape is dead, but as much as we try to get rid of it, tape keeps coming back and it keeps getting cheaper. And the beauty of tape is once you shut off, you write the tape and you shut off the tape system, it's cold. So, you're not wasting power, you're not wasting any energy at all, or requiring to cool it. The problem with tape is that, like anything else, it has to be rewritten periodically, it has to be kept very well, and the access time can be kind of slow. In fact, it can be really slow if you can't find the tape. So, there's tools we're supposed to use to fix that, media asset managers and other tools. But the bottom line is that what we're looking for is we're looking for low cost, we're looking for fast return on investment, we're looking for guaranteed access, and this is where object storage really wins.
What Tom
Yeah.
told us that object storage has been traditionally used on the cloud, especially for archiving and distribution, but performance, it's not its strength. How do we get around these performance issues? Because performance is everything in media, especially in post and production.
Absolutely, and that's a great question, Larry. And the key there is knowing where to use it. So in the and I almost like to think I was one of the early pioneers in doing this. We always look at content as being online, nearline, and farline. Online is the speed that we need. For the most part, that is our workspace for media. Most people still use SANs when they're talking about 4K and 4K DPX and uncompressed and very high speed media. They still need SANs and fiber channel infrastructure to do that. But more and more people are looking at NAS infrastructures where you can use 10 gig and 40 gig and 100 gig Ethernet and achieve fairly good performance numbers. That's when you're talking about ingest and work in process. Once you get past that finishing step, now we're into three other stages, right? We're into transcoding, which you also could say is delivery. Second stage is delivery, and then third stage is archive. And so what object storage really can help us with, and this is where Tom gets it as well, is that we need to go from that work in process, that finishing step, to the delivery step, which isn't latency dependent. So object storage can be relatively fast. The problem is it's the latency that kills us in production. So I don't think we're going to get to the point anytime soon using very safe things like erasure coding and object storage to allow us to do production. But when it comes to nearline and delivery and transcoding, with what I coined a long time ago called extended online, is these steps that we still consider in our production, but we don't need those latency-dependent applications for. But once the content is finished, we want to retain it and keep it safe. And that's what object storage really can help us with.
So let's say that we have a work group that is in transcode and delivery and distribution. What's involved in setting up a system? Does it require professional help? And is it affordable by non-enterprise sized groups?
Well, that is really the crux of the whole thing. So if you were to Google object storage and you were to Google affordable or low-cost object storage, you would see numbers like starting at $50 million, starting at $5 million, starting at $100,000, right? The affordability exactly is true. It's all about the enterprise access of that. And when people read about object storage, and they read, probably the most important thing is that it's easy access to the content. And what I mean by that is that it's globally distributed, as Tom probably said. And the beauty of this is you can access it through essentially a web browser. So HTTP, this REST interface, these REST APIs, we've made the transition to go from a file-based storage system to an object-based storage system virtually seamless. Now, that helps us to take object storage and to be able to put it on the desktop in ways that are really cloud-based. So if you use Google Drive today, or you use iCloud, or you use AWS, or some people use things like Storage Made Easy, which is a gateway to go to all those clouds, or the things we normally use, Dropbox. All these things are object storage based, and they put it on the desktop. But the question is, what if I wanted to build object storage in my facility, and I got a small facility? I don't have an enterprise class facility. You have to ask yourself three questions first. The first is, do you need a petascale architecture? And when I say petascale, I love that term, by the way. When you say petascale, it means really simply, how much content do I create every day, week, month, year? How many years of content do I want to keep? And does that content, is it in the terabytes or is it in the petabytes? And if the content is somewhere above 500 terabytes or approaching a petabyte, then I say today you can build yourself, and there was the key right there. That's number two. That's the do-it-yourself piece of building object storage rather than buying object storage. And you can actually do that and be quite effective and be cost effective and have it work for you really easily. That's really the key, Larry, is really getting that cost down. The third thing is you have to look at, well, what am I going to do about managing it? And the beauty of object storage, and this is why it's so popular in the cloud, not only that it can scale to trillions of objects, but also it abstracts the normal storage management away from you. You don't have to worry about individual RAID drives and storage pools and RAID sets. All that stuff goes away. And all you're essentially doing is building one namespace that just grows as you need it. Just keep plugging drives in. The other thing, the big benefit, and this will go back to the reason why you can do it yourself, the big benefit is that you eliminate data migration. So one of the problems that we have in a production facility, no matter if it's small or large, is we're always buying hard drives. So if I'm just one or two people working in a facility, I'm buying a lot of external hard drives, and I got cabinets full of them. And the problem is the power supplies are going to go, the drives are going to fail, and I'm constantly worrying about that and migrating data off or making 2 or 3 copies, and it's just not worth it. If I've got a slightly bigger facility, I might have a RAID system connected to a SAN or NAS, and for the most part, we're seeing people going back to SAN infrastructures where they're doing 4K and DPX and other uncompressed workflows. But at that point, you got to say to yourself, well, those drives and that whole infrastructure is good for 3 to 5 years. And a lot of times what we write on there is file system dependent. So take something like Star Wars that I was saying before. That came out in 1977. Well, that's, I think, if I do the math, that's 41 years ago. Actually, it's only 40, but let's just say it's 41 years ago. Well, if I'm migrating every 5 years, I've basically moved that movie Star Wars. That's a bad example because obviously it's been changed a lot. But I moved that content out 8 times. So I've had to move it 8 times. And when you've got a terabyte to move, it's not so bad. But when you've got 500 terabytes or a petabyte, those 8 times of moves could take 3 months or 6 months to move because you've got other things going on. You can't migrate that data real easily. The beauty of object storage is that I can put it out there, and because the interface is always the same, I access it the same way, theoretically 40 years from now, I will still have HTTP REST interface to be able to access it. So I just grow in place. I migrate in place. Very, very cheap. But how do you build it? That's the question. Well, there's a number of open source projects that people use, and there's a number of companies that have taken these open source projects, embedded those into servers, and these are standard, off-the-shelf servers, and they get the same resiliency out of just a few off-the-shelf servers and a few very inexpensive SAS arrays that you would get if you spent $1 million on a RAID system. And it's using technologies like Ceph or Swift, and you can usually find companies that are building these things or will help you build them. And for the most part, if you're looking at that half a petabyte to a petabyte, that's the most cost-effective way.
Where can people go to learn more about the products and the services that your company provides?
Larry, at Symply.com. That's Symply with a Y.
Is that Go Symply or just Symply?
You can use GoSymply.com.
That's Go Symply, all one word, GoSymply.com. And Alex Grossman is the CEO of Symply. And Alex, thanks for joining us today. Adrian Herrera is the VP of Marketing for Caringo. Caringo provides an object-based storage platform for production, distribution, and collaboration in media and entertainment industries to solve issues associated with storing and protecting rapidly growing digital assets while keeping them online and accessible. Hello, AJ. Welcome.
Hi, Larry. How are you?
Good. After reading that introduction, could you describe what it is that Caringo does in English?
Sure. We are a software vendor, software developers, and we've been doing it for 12 years. And we've always focused on object storage. And you install our software on any x86 servers, and it creates a massively scalable pool of storage. At our core, that's what we do. I know you're doing the series on object storage. It's great that you're doing it. But it's almost a misnomer to just classify object storage as storage. So we do focus a lot on content delivery, data management, search. So it's a very rich software platform. It's just not about storage.
Well, is object storage a thing or is it a process? How would you describe it?
Object storage is more of an architecture. It's a way to approach how you store data. An analogy that a lot of us vendors like to use in the space is it's very similar to a valet. You take your car to a valet, you give them your car, they give you a ticket. You don't really care where they park your car. You just want it to be safe and not scratched and get it back when you give them your ticket back. At core, its simplest form, object storage. You give this storage your content, and the storage gives you a key, and off you go.
Help me understand, because I get confused here. I take a file, I drop it on top of my RAID, and my RAID stores it. I don't care what sector it's in or what RAID disk it's stored in. I just simply gave it to the RAID and it parked it. Why is this different from object storage?
That's because you know where the file is. You know the directory, you know the file name, and what's actually going on behind the scenes is that file that you store is being shredded, broken into thousands of different segments, inodes, and it's being stored across the RAID sectors. That's great when you're in a single location or if you know the application. But let's say you don't know the application. Let's say you don't know the end user, or if you have to deliver that piece of content over the internet. And a lot of organizations are struggling. When you're dealing with file systems, you have to put a lot of layers of infrastructure to deliver. You need to know the exact location, which may be great when you're dealing with thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of files, but how about a million? How about a billion? These are scales that organizations of all size are getting to. And especially in the M&E world, we're seeing some very unique issues that object storage solves.
Give me an example of what object storage can do that other storage systems can't.
You can deliver the content, the media, directly from the storage layer. The native interface for most object storage solutions is TCP/IP. So you deliver it straight over the web. You compare that to file systems like NFS or SMB, and you have to put some layer of translation in front of it. With object storage, you can also protect content continuously. So you mentioned RAID, which is a great example. RAID was developed to protect a disk. And you protect a disk by adding certain amounts of additional disk. And if something goes wrong, you have to recover not only that specific piece of content, but the entire RAID sector or the entire disk. Recovery takes a very long time. Well, when you think about storing data not as a sector across a file system and RAID set, but storing it as a complete object on a disk or SSD, you can then do some very creative things from an automation perspective, and very useful things. You can automatically protect it. You can move it across the entire system so that you're continuously optimizing the system. You can store metadata with it, and we're seeing that more often these days. It's very easy to store, protect, and access very, very large-scale data sets. And we're talking hundreds of terabytes to hundreds of petabytes and millions to billions of files. It's an efficient way to store data or to identify that information.
Well, that gets me directly to Caringo. How does Caringo implement object storage? What am I getting from you and what does it do?
So from us, as I mentioned, we're software vendors. So you get our software. And you can either go out and we'll help you, of course, size the appropriate hardware. Or we also have a number of partners in our own hardware appliance that we can bring. So you either install our software on an x86 server hardware, and you can mix and match. And that's where a lot of the value comes in. You're buying commodity servers, and you're making them enterprise grade by installing our software. We also offer a number of interfaces, and a lot of object storage vendors offer a lot of interfaces. Historically, object storage has been around for a very long time. It's been around as long as we've been around. We were one of the first in the space, if not the first in the space, so it's been around over a decade. And the main interface 12 years ago was an API. And 12 years ago, APIs weren't all that popular. They wanted, applications wanted standards. They wanted SMB. They wanted CIFS. they wanted NFS. And that was one of the reasons why object storage took so long to really become mainstream, and it's mainstream now. And a lot of that has to do with the work that Amazon's put in. Amazon's done a tremendous job of pushing web services, AWS, in particular S3, and they've gotten basically the entire industry comfortable with developing to APIs and RESTful interfaces, and that's one of the reasons why object storage is now taking off. That in conjunction with M&E organizations needing this technology. We hear over and over again the struggles of trying to provide nearly free storage and instant access. The production houses tell us that their customers, the studios, when they work on projects for them, they want the production houses to store those projects indefinitely. And when they come knocking on the door again for a new project that uses some of the same content, they need them to provide those projects and that content instantly. They don't want to wait a day to go and grab it off the tape archives. And this is a very challenging issue for production houses.
And looking at the smaller end, for people that want to start with this, what would you describe as organization size that should consider object storage, and what's an entry price?
Any size organization. We offer a free 10 terabyte version of our software, fully functional. So if organizations want to try it out, they can go ahead and come to our site and download it. The reason why is certain types of object storage aren't just good at storing a lot of data from a capacity perspective. Some of them, like Caringo, are good at storing a lot of different files, small files. And that's where file systems have trouble. Object storage systems, by storing the content in a more complete way, are more efficient at storing very small files for very long periods of time. Traditionally, you protect content via RAID. There's a parity disk that you set in place. What object storage does, it's very similar to RAID, but it's at the content level. At its core, that's what object storage does. It focuses the storage on content. Traditional storage is really focused on the file system and the application's needs. Object storage is about the content. It's about protecting the content, providing access to the content, managing it, providing metadata around that content so it's easy to search against. It just simplifies the process of preservation and content delivery.
So if I'm a single user, just one or two people that need to keep the files internally, I'm thinking video editing is the clearest example, object storage is not going to help me a whole lot. But if I have a wide-ranging organization or I need to send files around to different offices or different people, object storage would be a better use case there?
Well, it depends. If you're a small production shop and you have hundreds of terabytes of data and you're struggling with protecting that, production studios now, they have to provide that project immediately. There is a notion of scale here. We find that if you have 10 terabytes, you may be able to handle this with a NAS that you buy at Fry's. But once you start getting to the hundreds of terabytes level, that's when your storage infrastructure takes a lot more care and feeding. You're not going to plug in 10 NASs and keep them going all the time. You may, but that's not going to scale effectively. So that's when object storage really comes into play. But we have organizations that are really small that are using us. We have a lot of organizations using us for tens of terabytes.
For people that want more information about Caringo, where can they go on the web?
They can go to Caringo.com. For M&E customers, we do suggest going to our M&E section. We have a lot of great information on use cases, and we produce a number of educational webinars. So they can go to the resource sections and check those out.
And Adrian Herrera is the VP of Marketing for Caringo. And AJ, thanks for joining us today. This has been fascinating.
Thank you, Larry.
Here's another website I want to introduce you to, doddleNEWS.com. DoddleNEWS gives you a portal into the broadcast, video, and film industries. It's a leading online resource presenting news, reviews, and products for the film and video industry. DoddleNEWS also offers a resource guide and crew management platform specifically designed for production. These digital call sheets, along with their app, directory, and premium listings, provide in-depth organizational tools for busy production professionals. DoddleNEWS is a part of the Thalo Arts community, a worldwide community of artists, filmmakers, and storytellers. From photography to filmmaking, performing arts to fine arts, and everything in between, Thalo is filled with resources you need to succeed. Whether you want the latest industry news, need to network with other creative professionals, or require state-of-the-art online tools to manage your next project, there's only one place to go, doddleNEWS.com. Erik Weaver is a specialist focused on the intersection of the cloud and the media and entertainment industry. He's currently creating strategy for HGST. This is a Western digital brand. And prior to HGST, he worked with the USC Film School to develop next-generation cloud standards to support global studios, as well as executive producing a number of award-winning films. Hello, Erik. Welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, we are glad you are here because in listening to the other interviews today, our brains have exploded, and your job is to help us put it all back together into a nice, neat package. Because tonight we're looking at object storage. How would you define this from your perspective?
I would define object storage as the solution to the next generation of problems. I would say that without getting too deep into things like erasure coding and the other aspects of object storage, it's to fundamentally overcome the limitations of RAID. I'm not sure if you're aware, but RAID basically hits a wall at about 6 terabytes. That means that at 6 terabytes, your time to rebuild a system gets to a point in which you might have failure while rebuilding. So you may go into a permanent failure of rebuilding a drive. Anybody who's dealt with this understands this kind of pain. So object storage is a way to scale up and out that steps over those limitations.
Well, is object storage hardware? Am I buying an object storage box? Or is it software? Or is it a file system? Or what is it?
Typically, object storage is software. It's laying over the fundamentally the same drives as other things, but you can buy it either way.
Does object storage enable me to find stuff better, or does it enable me to be more efficient with my storage capacity, or what?
So it doesn't actually provide a taxonomy or ontology to your metadata or to your data itself to help you find it better, but it allows you to grow that data bigger. For example, right now, the new drives are going to be 40 terabytes by 2025 based on the MAMR technology, the microwave-assisted technology. Understanding how to place all that data on these disks that we can actually, it allows you to find it, but it doesn't allow you to identify it or create those tags to it. But being able to structure that across multiple drives is absolutely critical.
Well, this sounds like a really wonderful problem for somebody that's well-versed in IT, but why should us media people care? Because, we can barely spell hard disk.
You got to care because of kind of the two things that I talked about just a second ago. The drive sizes are getting bigger, and that's what's going to be out there. And the second thing is basically the content's getting bigger. There's kind of a combination of a problem. So if you start off with like the new cameras, for example, the Arri Alexa, the new one that just came out, shoots at 2.6 terabytes an hour. That's a lot of content. That stacks up very, very quickly. At the same time, the television sets on the opposite side are now all coming out in UHD 10 or the new standards around ultra-high definition. Between those two things, the middle is going to get squished to be producing that content. You're either going to have a huge amount of data coming straight from set, or you're going to have somebody upstream pulling you saying, I need this content in this higher resolution. And so the middle does really get squeezed. Whether we like it or not, we're going to have to deal with it.
Well, what do we need to do to implement object storage? Do I need to throw out everything I've got and buy all new hardware, or can I retrofit it? And how much pain am I about to go through?
That is actually a fairly complex question. I would reach out to an expert on that. So most object storage is going to be based on some standardized protocol. For us, we use S3 or the same protocol that Amazon speaks. A lot of people are already moving towards clouds themselves. So this is basically your own on-set private cloud, the object storage is. And basically that's exactly why Google and Amazon go to it, because you can go scale up and scale out for that data. But you would really need to sit down and look at the tools that you're using and understand if they're S3 compatible or what you need to do in that workflow. We also work with several different companies who create kind of that bridge or that data mover between those different devices.
Well, now I'm confused. Does that mean that all of my media is not going to be stored locally? It's going to be stored up to the cloud? Because if that's the case, my bandwidth connection to the cloud isn't fast enough to be able to upload this.
I wouldn't say that. A lot of the object storage systems out nowadays are private object storage. So it depends on how large you are. You could either have your own private object storage, which would vary in size. A lot of them start somewhat large, upwards of 500 terabytes. That's pretty big. But once you get beyond that, it's going to be a mixed evolution. Sometimes you'll have things on your site, or if you're a slightly larger production company, you might have a mixture or a colo facility that's called an IOA or an exchange-based format. So you would basically place those racks in a colo facility and then cross-connect directly to an Amazon or Google. It just depends on your size or the size of the company you have.
I guess a bigger question is, who should even consider this? I mean, clearly enterprises and companies that are in the hundreds of thousands of terabytes, but should a small documentary work group consider it? And if so, is there a border upon which we should say, I should move to object storage, or I should be okay with traditional storage?
So I think that anybody who gets to the point of 200 terabytes and beyond, that or if you have a long-term strategy to go towards the cloud, either one of those is about the point where you begin to really need to start thinking about this.
So what does HGST have that helps us to get into this transition?
HGST actually has several different systems. We're typically a little bit more towards the enterprise class. We have systems that start around 500 terabytes and go up to 52 petabytes. It's not your everyday system. There's a couple other tools out there that we recommend for bridging the gap. The one I like the best is a company called avalanche.io. They're a wonderful tool for filmmakers. Basically, they give you a virtual desktop that shows you everything, making it look like it's all right in front of you. And it bridges between things like our P100, a G-Rack, because we also own G-Tech, and Amazon. So it looks at all of your storage, and it's based on something called C4, or Symply Standard 2114. And what that is that's a hashing algorithm that's standardized. So internally, a lot of different solutions will look at things like MD5 or other different types of checksum. This is basically a standardized checksum. This checksum is now beginning to be implemented all over the place. Things like PIC systems to the onset photochem cards or onset Technicolor cards, or possibly even ColorFront. A lot of the main tools are now beginning to implement this across the board so that you know absolutely that you have the same file and how many copies of that file and how do you relate metadata to that file. It's a bit of a topic, but it's a very important evolution in standardization for the community.
Well, it sounds like, if I can summarize what you've been saying, if we're one person working on a locally attached device, we don't really need to worry about object storage immediately. But as our number of people in our work group expands, as our storage capacity expands, and as we need to send files outside a local work group, object storage is something we need to consider. Have I summarized that correctly?
Absolutely. That's a great summary. This is not something for everybody. It's a little bit more for large enterprise systems. You do need to understand the fundamental characteristics that touch cloud and why that's important. It's all S3 typically driven because that's the protocol in between the two and most object storage systems.
And that there are tools out there, so you do need to understand what the tools are to move between different layers of storage. And that's really the future. Because like in the future, we've kind of gone from your standardized breakdowns of saying NAS, SAN, object, then it goes to software-defined, right? But software-defined basically has a heavy onus of integration that's very challenging to keep up with. But the third phase kind of coming around the corner is really that phase in which there's a light coupling, an easy way to connect with different software applications and protocols, which is via things like C4. It helps create a structure to understand exactly where all your data is at any particular time, and then create a Rosetta Zone for the different resources.
And then for people who want more information about what HGST offers for object storage, where can they go on the web?
HGST.com/media.
That's HGST.com/media. And Erik Weaver is a specialist focusing on the intersection of the cloud and the media entertainment industry, a luminary for the media and entertainment industry at HGST. Erik, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I've been thinking a lot about storage recently. Here at my office, I have about 200 terabytes of storage capacity, tracking just a bit more than 550,000 files. And even though I or someone in my team created most of them, I'm still having a hard time finding the right file at the right time. And every week, between my training and the Buzz, I create another 50 to 100 files that I need to store and track. Adding to the challenge, I'm still accessing files that I created 10, even 15 years ago. And I know from all my emails that I'm not unique. That was one of the driving reasons I had in wanting to do a show on object storage. I wanted to learn whether I could use it. Object storage was first described in 1995, with active development starting around 2000. It is at the heart of virtually every file stored on the web, from music on Spotify to files on Dropbox and everything on Amazon. It seeks to solve the inherent limitations of traditional hierarchical file systems such as Windows or HFS+, which limit the number of files that we can store in a folder or on a hard disk or in a RAID. Additionally, while RAIDs protect us from a hard disk crash, object storage can protect us from a file crash where a media file becomes corrupt and can't be played. Objects contain additional descriptive properties which can be used for better indexing or file management. As well, we don't need to spend time setting up RAIDs or managing hard disks. Object storage also allows the addressing and identification of individual objects by more than just file name and file path. We no longer have to worry about two files erasing each other because they have the same name. The problem is that currently, object storage systems are expensive and difficult to implement. That's what companies like Symply and HGST are trying to change. By now, we know that media production, editing, and distribution are only going to make the file management problem worse. Object storage is not for everyone, at least not yet. But our current system is rapidly running out of room to expand. As Erik Weaver said, at some point we will need to change how we store our files. Learning more about object storage gives us a better understanding of our current problems and helps us plan the transition to whatever we'll be using in the future. Just something I'm thinking about. I want to thank our guests for this week: Tom Coughlin of Coughlin & Associates, Alex Grossman of Symply Inc., A.J. Herrera of Caringo, Erik Weaver of HGST, and James DeRuvo with doddleNEWS. There's a lot of history in our industry, and it's all posted to our website at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Here you'll find thousands of interviews, all online and all available to you today. And remember to sign up for our free weekly show newsletter that comes out every Saturday. Talk with us on Twitter at DPBuzz and Facebook at digitalproductionbuzz.com. Our theme music is composed by Nathan Doogie Turner with additional music provided by smartsound.com. Text transcripts are provided by Take One Transcription. Visit takeone.tv to learn how they can help you. Our producer is Debbie Price. My name is Larry Jordan, and thanks for listening to the Digital Production Buzz. A Digital Production Buzz is copyright 2018 by Thalo LLC.
The Digital Production Buzz was brought to you by KeyFlow Pro, a simple but powerful media asset manager for collaboration over a network. Download a free 30-day trial at keyflowpro.com.